So dear Sciences Po alumni, distinguished guests, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Résidence de France for the launch of the Sciences Po Transatlantic Forum. Sciences Po enjoy a well-deserved reputation as one of France's top universities for politics and international relations, and it's a university that my wife Sabine and I are proud to have attended. And by the way, if we didn't attend the Sciences Po, none of us will be here tonight, because we met on the first day in Sciences Po, and Sabine was much smarter than I was, and she helped me to get the diploma. What is maybe more known, but less than Sciences Po is an important center for international relations, is that Sciences Po has developed a unique connection with the United States, where it boasts an impressive network of 80 partner universities and 10 dual degree programs. The Sciences Po American Foundation, which is partnering with us today, has played a key role in developing this network over the years, and I would like to thank Hans Catelin for unwavering dedication.
Until I speak.
It lacks a bit of energy. So today is about celebrating and expanding academic cooperation between France and the United States as we come together for the first meeting of this Sciences Po Transatlantic Forum. Tonight we will talk about digital disinformation and cybersecurity with our guest of honor, Camille François. And this is obviously a highly consequential issue as 2024 is fast approaching and disinformation is spreading with ever-growing efficiency as a result of emerging deception techniques. It is vital for democracies to promote online safety and prevent the erosion of information integrity. France and the United States are doing a great deal together, and that very subject is in fact an important part of my job on a daily basis. But Camille will tell you more, as she has played a central role in promoting this transatlantic connection, so I will be short. Once again, great pleasure to welcome you here tonight, and again, a warm welcome to Hans Catelin, Executive Director of the Sciences Po American Foundation. Merci.
Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, merci. For those of you who know me, I speak a lot, so I'm sorry in advance. It really is a great honor to be here and to bring the Sciences Po community in the home of France, but also, as they said, in the home of two very distinguished alumni, Madame Sabine Raxivili and His Excellency. Thank you again for having us. A few of you don't really know Sciences Po, so I'm going to try to start with a few words on Sciences Po. Sciences Po is an international research university, selective and open to the world, which is among the best in the humanities and social sciences. Fundamental education is offered across 5 principal disciplines: economics, law, history, sociology, and political science. Since its creation 150 years ago, Sciences Po has been continuously reinventing itself. Today, it is a hub for new ideas infused by creative minds and educated citizens capable of impacting the world and transforming society. The Sciences Po American Foundation mission is to expand the footprint of Sciences Po in the United States. Your commitment today aims to support our ambition to be a company of European thought through education and research. Tonight we're launching the Sciences Po Transatlantic Forum in partnership with the Embassy to promote transatlantic partnership and celebrate together the eminent friendship between France and the US. Tonight we're also gathering to award the 2023 US Sciences Po Alumni Award. The award is an opportunity to recognize and honor outstanding individuals who embody the value that Sciences Po and our community strive to uphold. We launched the award in 2015, and we've recognized a few alumni who are visionary leaders, each in their own way. I'm not going to name them all, promise. A few is Hubert Joly, the former chairman and CEO of Best Buy, Guillaume Giselle, the president and CEO of Tom Ford, Maël Gavet, the president of Techstar, Mike Schmoll, the campaign manager for Pete Buttigieg in the 2020 presidential campaign, and Jamison Greer, last year laureate and lawyer and international trade expert, but also the architect of the Phase 1 economic and trade agreement between the US and China. This year, we are honoring another leader, a woman leader. Camille may be young, she graduated in 2011, But she's already achieved extraordinary success in her career with projects that have helped understand and mitigate harms emerging from digital technologies. Camille is recognized as one of the leading experts in digital disinformation and cybersecurity. She currently serves as the Global Director for Trust and Safety at Niantic. My son is very proud of it because he can tell his friend that he knows someone that works for Pokemon. And one day he's going to get a special shiny Pokemon. It's a very big thing.
I'm working on that.
Yeah, on the shiny one?
Yeah.
Right. She was previously the Chief Innovation Officer at Graphica, a company providing insight on social media, tracking how states are using social media for disinformation and misinformation. Prior to joining Graphica, she worked at Jigsaw, a unit within Google dedicated to exploring threats to open societies. She has advised government and parliamentary committees on both sides of the Atlantic, from investigating Russian interference in the 2016 US presidential election to leading the French government 2022 inquiry into the economic opportunities and social challenges presented by the metaverse, and becoming one of the co-leaders of an independent innovation lab becoming one of the co-leader of an independent innovation lab on artificial intelligence and democracy as part of the États généraux de l'information, a landmark initiative launched by President Macron to address the challenges and risks the new developments in AI pose to democracies. This project is ambitious and global in scale and is executed in partnerships with Columbia CIPA and Sciences Po. Through her career, she has already been able to leverage her social science base in a world shifting with technology to bridge the gap between innovation and real social change. Camille's career is a model in many respects, and it is aligned with Sciences Po's mission to offer education that bridges the gap between the social science and STEM field, to support transdisciplinary research to bridge the knowledge gap between experts in the social science and the developers at the cutting edge of AI tech, to shape policies that encourage innovation while protecting vital democratic and social institutions. The complexities that exist in our world today within organizations and also at a global scale makes cross-disciplinary education and research a necessary step that we can better understand how different forces interact and shape our world. Perhaps it is a testament to the quality of Camille as a leader, that she has not shied away from broaching the social side of her business endeavors. Camille is both a thinker and a doer. It is an ideal for Sciences Po to both inspire critical thought and instill the capacity to act. In this way, Camille has served as the best possible role model. It is a privilege to honor her as this year's recipient of the US Sciences Po Alumni Award.
So, as a reminder, you wear no less than 3 hats these days, metaphorical hats. You are Senior Director of Trust and Safety at Niantic, which indeed does interesting things with people and getting them to go out of the house to experience various kinds of AR experiences. You have been appointed by President Macron to co-lead the États généraux de l'information, which are his landmark initiative on information society. And last but not least, you co-lead a newly launched innovation lab on artificial intelligence at Columbia University, alongside the amazing Maria Ressa. That's quite a lot for one person. So just, do you sleep at night? Like, how does that work?
Thank you, Camille. I'm really honored to be here, so thank you so much, everybody, for joining in this conversation. Yes, I wear 3 hats, and 2 things on this. The first thing is, I'm very fortunate that throughout my career, I've managed to explore those issues of the socio-technical impact of digital technologies and how do we mitigate those harms from 3 vantage points. The first one is business, and specifically Silicon Valley. What can those tech companies do themselves to understand those harms, predict them, and mitigate them? The second one is governments, who have an immense role to play here. We talked about it. I was fortunate to work with the US Senate on these issues. I'm now fortunate to serve my government in helping think about what we do about those information harms. Governments have a role to play. They have maybe been a little bit slow to sort of catch up with where we are, but we're there. And finally, having a strong foot in academia is a privilege. Academia is also shaping how we think about those new socio-technical harms and has a critical role to play. We can't just abandon these issues to Silicon Valley wholeheartedly. So it's been a privilege to sort of be in the midst of it. And while we like to, to center people. That's easier than to center teams and entire fields. I will say that a lot of that, of course, are collective endeavors. And so in all of these endeavors, I am so fortunate to be accompanied by wonderful teams. One of my biggest point of pride at Niantic is having built a team of experts in trust and safety who have done a lot of work in the field and who came to say, let's reinvent what this function could be like. Similarly, you know, at Columbia University, I'm surrounded by Maria Ressa and by wonderful researchers and partners who are coming to think about, all right, what is this moment that we're facing with AI and how this shapes some of these issues that we thought we knew, but are suddenly getting a new veneer. So all of that is very much a team sport.
All right, I hear that, and you say you're fortunate to find yourself in this space, and you found yourself there, but I don't think it only happened by chance. When I met you, it was about 10 years ago, I would say, which doesn't make us any younger. And you were, yeah, I know. And you were at the time a researcher at a team at Google whose job was to provide quantitative insights into the effectiveness of marketing campaigns. So how does one go from that, which is not a typical post-science po job, to working on violent extremism, then cybersecurity, then foreign interference, and now trust and safety? How did that work out?
Yeah, it's a funny story, and I owe a lot to Sciences Po, who's given me a lot of latitude in my studies. They let me take a gap year when I wanted to do a startup, which I have done and miserably failed at, but you know, they let me do that. And at Sciences Po, I had met Bruno Latour at the Media Lab, and I had sat and talked with him, and he said, I understand 50% of what you're saying, which was a big honor, because I understood about 10% of what Bruno Latour was saying, which, you know, at the time was a lot for me. And then he said, I understand 50%, but I know who will understand the other 50%. I will ship you to Yochai Benkler over at the Berkman Center at Harvard, because they do the tech stuff thing you want to do. And so he did, and I was shipped over to the Berkman Center, where I realized that the study of the socio-technical impact of new technology was actually a real academic field. I thought it was completely fascinating. We didn't really have that at the time. We had the Media Lab. It was sort of edging there, but we hadn't done this sort of full leap into making it a serious field of study. And so I got the taste of this, and I came back to Sciences Po, and I said, love being here, also I need to go back. I applied to the Fulbright Fellowship in order to do my master's degree at Columbia. I failed at it, and so I got a job at Google in order to fund my master's. I got it on the second time, which was nice. But the job that I got at the time was something that I thought I would never use. So I had a wonderful boss, Georges Mahot. He was a very serious French statistician, and the team, its entire job was to figure out what is the impact of exposing people to videos on YouTube. And the reason why we were doing that is because we wanted to sell lipstick to L'Oréal. And it was super complicated because you needed to figure out what we called the sort of incremental reach, so the impact that comes from YouTube that really no other media does to you. And that was a very structured and rigorous way to think about how do you measure and understand exposure to social media, which at the time I thought, I will never use this ever again. So that didn't exactly pan out the way it did, and I was like, you know, I kind of really want to do geopolitics, that's what I studied for, and eventually I did my master's at Columbia, I came back to the Berkman Center, all of that, and then I came back to Google, and I think I was quite fortunate to see the sort of second tail of the development of what we call the trust and safety field, which was really that moment where Silicon Valley started reckoning with geopolitics, and at that time, it really was the Al-Qaeda ISIS moment. It was this idea that specifically at Google, we had YouTube, we had search, and we just needed to have a stronger strategy for how to tackle Al-Qaeda and ISIS starting impact on the platform. And that was this moment where we started thinking about, all right, content moderation used to just be about removing content that we know is bad. That's not going to be sustainable. When we enter a more geopolitical frame, we also need to develop new intelligence practices. And really, this ISIS Al-Qaeda violent extremism movement was the sort of key moment where intelligence work and geopolitical analysis was brought into Silicon Valley. It existed in a different part of Silicon Valley, in the cybersecurity side, but it didn't exist just yet when it came to content. So I was very lucky to see that. And then from there, it was all downhill to just being more and more specialized in different types of bad guys. So, violent extremists, and then trolls, and different types of Russian trolls. I can. Oh, you want me to do
I will not let you go. No, I enjoy you trying to break out all of this in one go. But I will say, I think that's one thing that strikes me with your career, and that I look at the younger graduates in this room, that it was not necessarily a planned thing. I think you found one thread you want to pull on, and then you moved on to the next one, and you certainly landed in this very interesting job you're in now. Which, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about trust and safety. I'm pretty sure it's a word that most people in this room have heard before. And certainly, like, Niantic is a company that not everyone knows, but that does really interesting experiences, as I've mentioned. Pokemon Go is one of them. But basically, think of the challenges that come with getting people outside of their house and into the world with their phone to try to enjoy different kinds of experiences. There's a lot of risk associated with that. So, Cam, you have an unviable position of trying to navigate those risks. I'm sorry. But the words trust and safety mean very different things to different people. And I would love to hear you speak to what it actually means in practice. What does a trust and safety team do? And how has that shaped your perspective on the online environment and the threats that it deals with?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I will take it on a very boring level and talk a little bit about theory here.
I don't believe that.
When I came to the field, there was a sort of strong separation between, in Silicon Valley, the teams who dealt with operation content moderation. So the teams who were responsible for finding spam, sometimes finding material that is abusive towards children and exploitative, and the teams that did cybersecurity work, threat intelligence, who were studying what well-resourced geopolitical sophisticated actors were doing, both to attack the companies in general, but also their users in particular. I was lucky enough to work on this category, which at the time we called our most vulnerable users. So journalists, human rights activists, people who run for office in areas where they're likely to be targeted by essentially states who love hacking into computers. And when you are a journalist or a human rights activist, you're not a bank, you don't have an enormous cybersecurity team that's here to defend you, and often they are targeted first. And so we had this sort of horrible conception that they were the canary in the coal mine. I later, revisiting this metaphor, learned that the canaries in the coal mine are the ones that you watch die, right? So I think we were there to say, well, they're the first ones to experience sometimes the harms and specific threats that will later come for broader populations. But instead, I think it was sort of a sad metaphor that also said, like, there are people that we can watch and sort of see what type of troubles they get into. So we had this sort of complicated relationship, and we need to do something to better protect those users who are very vulnerable. And also, the types of troubles that they experience often give us the signs we need to better understand broader, more complicated, sophisticated threats. I promise I'm going somewhere with that. And so, as we were doing field work, working with those folks, they were often targeted by sophisticated malware. And I remember that moment where a few of them started saying, yes, there's the malware, there's the hacking, there's the surveillance, but also, can we talk about this social media thing? We're like, okay, what's the social media thing? And they were saying we're harassed, and we are the victims of coordinated, sophisticated campaigns that are designed to silence us. And there was a debate, frankly, I think, in the field and the practitioners around us, from some teams who were saying, well, that's not our realm, that's not cybersecurity. That's maybe too soft, that's some social media stuff, and frankly, isn't it too bad that some people are mean on the internet? And some other practitioners who were saying, like, no, actually, it's part of the realm of the types of tactics that those states deploy online. And when we think about Russia hacking computers, we should also think about the type of information operations that they deploy to silence those targets. And there was a really interesting moment where those two disciplines of, on one side, folks were thinking about content, right? What type of content is good content and bad content? And from the other side, folks were very steep in the geopolitical impact that, that those companies were facing, and those sophisticated threats had to come together and say, okay, there's a new threat that perhaps we had a blind spot on. It had already been documented by journalists, by human rights activists, by smart scholars, and now we must reckon with it before it eats us all up, which, you know, the end of the story, it did. It became a very big reckoning in 2017 in Silicon Valley. A lot of the companies were not able to successfully get ahead of this threat, and it ended up being sort of the thing that dominated the headlines, the congressional testimonies, and the life of Silicon Valley for more than a year. I see Olga smiling in the room as somebody who is also on the front lines of this. And I will say, and to your earlier comment, interestingly, it is my experience that in Silicon Valley, a lot of the people who said, hey, wait a minute, this isn't happening, it's unfolding in front of our eyes, we need to take it seriously. It might blur the boundaries of a discipline, but it is a threat and we must address it. We're women.
So that's how you got into the realm of trust and safety, but that doesn't tell us exactly what you do today, which is now you've sort of crossed the gap. You're not in security anymore. You're fully into this world, this weird world of content and behaviors, and trying to figure out how you make a service safe. What does that mean? Yeah.
So every company is going to have a different answer to that question, right? It starts with what is it that you bring into the world? Who are your users? What types of harms are they likely to experience? What are your values? At Niantic, in my work, we've actually borrowed a lot of the frameworks of cybersecurity simply because I think that cybersecurity is a field that is slightly more mature than trust and safety, and so we can learn a few lessons, maybe skip ahead a few beats. And so we do safety by design. And so instead of sort of having safety be the last thing that we check a box for before a product goes out, we engage our game producers and PMs, product managers, into red teamings, and so exercises that look at those early products and that we just try to break it. We try to figure out, all right, how would I use this to harm someone? How can this go south? How can we think about the type of vulnerabilities that already exist, and how can we mitigate those? So that's one of the things we do. And then, of course, you know, because we have different, like, frankly, like an amazing set of different problems, we have disciplines. And so we have a child safety expertise that only focuses on protecting kids online from the very specific types of harms that kids experience that go from grooming, which is very difficult to detect and to tackle, right? Grooming is when predators will use online services to identify victims and to contact them. And that touches the exchange of what we call CSAM in the industry, so child sexual abuse material. So yeah, the world of trust and safety is sort of this full of dark corners, addressing different types of harms. Most of them, frankly, are still centered on organized bad actors trying to exploit products in order to do harm. And then some of it, of course, is also focused on things that happen simply by the result of deployment of these products in society. So, yeah.
I see Anne waving us, and we have 5 minutes left. So we're going to skip through the next series of questions then. All of that sort of draws a stark portrayal of some of the challenges around the information space. We've mentioned many of them. You're now co-leading an initiative created by President Macron to address some of these questions. Can you say more about what that is and how you intend to help with that?
Yes. So the États généraux de l'information, in typical French fashion, we took a very grandiose historical reference. The États généraux is the big collective consultation that happens around the revolution. In French policy parlance, it's a moment where we sort of take the state of the art of where we are, what are the issues, what do we know how to solve, what do we not know how to solve, how do people feel about it, what's the expert consensus. And of course, information society is large. And so, you know, we double down, at least on my side and with Maria Ressa, on democracy and AI, which is also still very large. with this idea that 2024 is a pivotal moment for a few reasons. The first one is, we talked about that moment in trust and safety, and I will say we don't really know how that story ends, because right now we have, on the one hand, what sometimes we jokingly refer to as the Elon Musk effect, right? A bunch of tech companies saying, well, we've done all these investments and it looks like we could also get away with firing all these people and no longer doing these efforts, so let's give it a try. There's also a political climate that in the US, frankly, that makes it less easy to do some of this proactive work, notably on disinformation. So you have an Elon Musk effect on one side, and then you have the Brussels effect on the other side, which is the Europeans rising and saying like, hey, new idea, why don't we have regulations on this? Why don't we have a binding regulatory framework like the DSA, the DMA? Now you're going to have to do this. It's no longer things you do to look good or because you told Congress that you were going to do so. And we don't really know how that story is going to end up, right? Like it's very much two forces pushing in opposite directions. That's unfolding at a moment where in 2024, we have a number of critical elections happening globally. 54 elections in 65 countries, including Taiwan, India, Indonesia, the US, European elections. So there's a little bit of an urgency to figure out, all right, how do we get our ducks in a row in order to prevent some of the very negative and detrimental impact that we know some of these technologies can have on electoral integrity. On top of this already explosive situation, you can throw in generative AI. Totally new type of technology. And we don't really know, frankly, what are the right policies and what are the right tools that we can deploy to safely ensure that generative AI doesn't have a detrimental impact on these questions. And so there's an urgency to figure out the answers to these questions, and that's where we'll be starting.
Well, you bring up generative AI, and I can't miss the opportunity to press a little on that. It's been the buzzword of the year. Everyone's talking about it. At the same time, some of this technology is not entirely new. What's your take on the reality of the threats and the scope of the opportunities in the space for societies and democracies?
Yeah, so we can't say the reality of the threats because we still don't know which threats we're talking about. There are a few things that have been discussed. For instance, like how bad do we think deepfakes are going to be? My own personal opinion is that this is not likely the most impactful threats. That being said, there's also a number of questions that must be addressed in a normal deployment of these technologies. In an environment in which you have everybody using ChatGPT, Claude, Bard on a regular basis, they're also going to use it in electoral times. And so they're going to turn to these chatbots and say, hey, who are these candidates? What are these platforms? What do we know about them? Maybe those are fine questions for them to answer. Do we know what is the desirable answer? Can we make sure that those answers are complete, that they're factual, that they're not hallucinations? Can we make sure that there's no sexist bias, racist bias? And similarly, when do you stop thinking that questions are acceptable? Can you say, where are the polls? Or is this a moment where we would rather those technologies say, hey, maybe not a question for me. What about help me manipulate a vote? And so I'm not saying that there's going to be one terrible thing that is going to descend upon us, but I do think that there's a lot of certainly quite important open questions for how we weave in these technologies into the daily lives of millions of people as they go to the polls globally. We haven't really produced the answer to these questions. They don't exist in the public debate. They haven't been scrutinized in academia. They haven't been discussed with policymakers, and they're going to unfold in real time as we watch a lot of citizens around the world go to the polls. So these are the things that we're going to talk about. Exciting, I guess.
Well, I have two more questions and I promise I'm done. Yes. I promise I will. I will end with a positive note. The before last question is, this is a Sciences Po event after all. So let's talk about governments for a second. What is their role in all of this?
They make laws.
Thank you. And that, my friends, was the brilliant Sciences Po training at work.
you know, it's interesting because I do feel very badly French on this one. Often in American context, people ask me, do you think there's a role for regulation? And I'm like, hell yeah. Like, what is plan B? Of course there's a role for regulation, and, you know, governments are democratically elected and well-positioned and equipped to make those rules. It's odd that this is becoming a question, and I think if we're honest, it is, right? Silicon Valley has produced a lot of alternatives. They don't work. Oversight boards, you know, not digging on any company, but, you know, oversight boards, let's make up our own sort of self-regulation forums. All of this plays a role, but at the end of the day, we absolutely need regulations and regulations made by governments. We also are coming out of a period where we spent a lot of time mocking governments for not being able to fully understand tech questions. I don't think that's always always intellectually honest. I think that actually a lot of policymakers are catching up, have caught up. A lot of these regulatory frameworks are more, you know, better suited to addressing the moment. And I also think that there's a little bit of a tech hubris in this comment, right? We don't look at policymakers and say, you need to be expert in farming technologies in order to regulate anything that has to do with vegetables, right? That's just like, policymakers regulate complex landscapes. That's their jobs, right? Like, yes, tech is complicated. It can also be explained. It should be explained. And it is on all of us to make sure that our regulators are equipped and able to properly do their jobs here.
All right, I promised and to end on a positive note. So that was always the plan. So with my last question, I think you've been dubbed, at one point at least, the most optimistic person to have looked at these dark corners of the internet. So let's end on another optimism. Why should we be optimistic?
We're making progress. I swear we are. Sometimes it feels slow and incremental, but you know, to go back to your initial question, like, what is trust and safety? It's a field that wasn't even recognized 10 years ago. And now we have colleagues who are leading up a whole new generation. I have the privilege to teach trust and safety. There are people who want to do this work. Their amazing report, Rose recently wrote one of them on this. There's a journal of online trust and safety. There are conferences, and that's sort of the beautiful cycle of knowledge production is, yes, there are complex issues, and yes, it seems like we're maybe a little bit slow, but we're heading in the right direction, and we're building upon all this knowledge and material. So can we build fast enough? Can we you know, tackle this collectively as sort of a broader team? Yes, those are the imperatives that are in front of us. But I do think that a lot of people are meeting the moment, including folks in Silicon Valley, including regulators and policymakers, including scholars and folks in academia, and that's exciting.
You heard it first. It's exciting. All right. Thank you so much, Camille. And back to you, Anne.